We are back with another lean and mean episode of the Cold Star Project. We are here with Ben Watkins, founder of Intrinsic Search. And you can see his lovely shirt there with the nice logo. He runs an executive search firm that is particularly focused on helping tech companies find the right people. And I wanted to talk to Ben. I reached out to him because we haven't really talked much about hiring on this program, and I want to dig into that. What kind of speed bumps, Ben, do people have when they approach you? What's going on in their hiring process or their growth that they're like, oh my gosh, I need professional help right now?
Hi, Jason. Thank you very much for inviting me along today. I think clearly it depends on where and what the different problems are. But in the US, on our West Coast division, we notice it's the ability to find good people and keep hold of those good candidates. For example, we were looking for a VP of marketing in California, San Francisco recently. And if you leave it 2 or 3 days, the candidate snapped up elsewhere. So really, it's just the speed. If you snooze, you lose on the West Coast. You really have to grab any great salespeople immediately, both hands, proactively sell your SaaS company's proposition and growth plan, get them bought in. But if you don't get back to them feedback, or you delay, you go away for a couple of weeks vacation, that you'll come back and they'll think, who are you? I can't remember. I've had 15 other opportunities put to me since we last spoke. So it's just the speed. That's one of the major ones.
Great. So that's a good indicator of how well the economy is doing.
Particularly San Francisco, indeed.
So what do tech founders come to you for specifically, as opposed to just somebody at like an auto auction who's got that guy who goes, yeah, and puts in their bid kind of and makes sure that the auctioneer is seeing them?
So it depends. Sometimes they're confidential roles. There could be a vice president of sales, a secret confidential role to replace somebody. But more often than not, they're hiring managers who may not have the network in new geographies such as Germany, Sweden, the East Coast, the US, where they've already tried to fill the roles themselves through their own network, but they hit a dead end. So it's often tech SaaS firms going into new geographies or areas they don't cover, or they just haven't got the time or the bandwidth to find people themselves. They've exhausted their current network.
Okay. So exhausting their current network, and you're reaching much farther afield.
Yes,
Do you help people with visas? I'm a Canadian and I live in the US. I've been here almost 10 years. Yeah, that process is not easy to navigate.
So the answer is no.
Okay.
In the EU, we don't tend to work with people unless they've already got the qualifications. It's too complicated, and there will always be an EU person. What we have found that many North American SaaS firms will sponsor and send over to Europe one of their existing leadership members of staff, and they often work out great. So that's fairly common. But in terms of a cold individual with no visa, it's a minefield. It's complicated.
Right. As we said. Okay. What scale, what size does a tech firm have to be at before they're a good candidate to work with you?
So I would say they're normally past Series A. They're around 50 people in their HQ. So they don't tend to be less than 50 employees, and they're rarely over 500. So we're really looking at the sweet spot between 50 and 500. Once they get over 500, often they have their own internal talent acquisition team. They got to that stage. So that's our sweet spot, 50 to 500 globally.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the expertise that you have in sourcing these people and connecting with them and kind of saying, hey, come on over here and listen to this offer.
Yeah, so personally, I go back to the 97. So we've been doing this for 97, 20 years. And that was also in enterprise software and SaaS, of course, most recently. So clearly attraction is key. You have to be able to pitch your clients' solution and vision and growth and offer really, really slick. You don't get much time to do that. So client attraction is important. Candidate attraction is important. So you really have to be able to pitch it really, really slick to get their interest, the best performers.
Where do you draw most of your candidates from? Is it LinkedIn or?
So we have 8 channels. LinkedIn is one of them, but we also have over 10,000 headhunted candidates on our own internal database, which have built over 13 years, which gives you more than LinkedIn because you have their email, phone number to hand immediately. We advertise discreetly. We ask for networking. We run events for leaders in SaaS in London. We ran another conference in San Mateo a few months ago at a major conference there. So we have many different channels to attract the best people.
Okay. So they're growing. They're at 50 plus people. They know I can't get the right person on my own, or maybe they've exhausted their own network. Are there any other indicators where they're like, hey, I should work with Ben?
I think when they're looking for entrepreneurial people in new geographies. So if a North American tech firm is looking to expand in Germany, for example, or France, that's where we're experts. So we've got the existing networks. We understand all the different cultural aspects as well. We've even written a little booklet called the Gold Book for a North American SaaS firm scaling in Europe, which is free. Anyone wants a copy, we can share that, which breaks down various countries, the different labor laws. So if a SaaS leader is looking to scale internationally, then we're certainly here to help and give
okay. That's a very cool perspective. So say they're doing all right in the US and they want to expand into another market. Now, will that be purely for sales, or could they set up an office there, like a dev team?
It's predominantly going to be a sales office.
Okay.
So that they're bringing a country manager and a sales team, maybe a marketing team. That's pretty common over here, like a satellite office. But what's really important if you're scaling in Europe is to create proper entities. If you go to Germany, you just have a guy or girl working from home, that's not going to work. You have to set up a proper, what they call a GmbH, do it properly, because the Germans won't buy from you otherwise.
Nice. Yeah, I've been studying German for 4 or 5 years now. Right. Spare time. So I know the GmbH quite well. Gesellschaft, factory, and fun other long conjunctive phrases. So, okay. So you get them over there. They're doing a sales job. Now, how do you discern who is a good candidate and, like, not necessarily, and I'm talking about culture fit here, right? That's really what I want to dig into. For tech firms who are scaling fast and they've hit this bumpy road of, oh my gosh, I need people over there, wherever over there is. And they find you and okay, this is the structure you need. These are the ins and outs of the marketplace. This is the kind of person you need. How do you screen for that culture fit?
So we certainly, in terms of the background of their salespeople, we go through their work history, their stability. With culture fit specifically, we run a psychometric test using science which takes literally 10 minutes to fill out 50 questions, and it produces a 2 or 3 page report, which is almost like your other half wrote it. It's so accurate. It talks about the soft skills, the sort of person you are, introverted, extroverted, those types of things. So it's an additional 3 page document in addition to a resume, which talks about the individual sort of person they are, which of course goes into the culture of that person. If they're an extrovert, for example, what type of leader they are, if they like delegation, if they don't. So that gives you much more insight there.
Right. Is that a proprietary thing, or is that something like a third party?
It's a third party. It's a US leading. We bumped into it. A few of the CEOs we work with in the US actually use it themselves, and they use the results before they even look at the resume to make sure the person ticks the right boxes on the grid and in the results you get. So it's really, really accurate.
Okay.
And very, very common.
Dave Curlin's OMG assessment has been used for quite a while, but that's more sales oriented, it sounds like, than the one that you're using. What other soft skills? Tell us more about that.
So I think in terms of soft skills, what we notice in terms of cultural fit over here, often we're looking for people with SaaS who are coming from SaaS as well. If people coming from a perpetual software license background, they may not have the right sort of culture fit in terms of the wanting to retain clients and really keep and win that customer long term. So I think if individuals come from the SaaS background, they do fit in much better in terms of the type of sell, the high velocity selling, of course, as opposed to the traditional perpetual license people, which is a slightly different culture way of selling.
Okay. So you're saying you're looking more for farmers than hunters?
We are looking very, very much for hunters. But of course, when I talk about retention, we're then moving to customer success, which is another complete area of the market we're very strong in. So of course, new business salespeople, but you need to have the customer success people, the account managers as well, to make sure that the client makes the most out of their software purchase in the long term.
Okay. We hear a lot about titles. Somebody called a vice president of sales. If they're just plunked into a market on their own, a new market on their own, are they really a vice president?
It's a great question, Jason. It's something we notice predominantly by North American companies coming here, that they'll have 10 vice presidents of sales in a company of 200 people in the UK. So they do give out titles a lot easier than perhaps the European headquartered companies do. But ultimately, it's a way of getting a name on a card, might open more doors for you in selling. But over here, you don't tend to get given titles so easy like that. And particularly in the larger companies like Salesforce, you have to earn the title VP of Sales.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I fully agree with that requirement to earn. Probably going to get some hate for that, but this is a Lean and Mean podcast. We are talking with Ben Watkins, founder of Intrinsic Source, and it is more than a recruitment firm. I really think you should be talking, and you probably are, more about the screening that you're doing up front in any conversations that you're having with potential clients, because that stands out to me. When you said it, it really stood out. And I'm sure many kinds of companies that you're in competition with are using similar sort of technology, but it's good to hear at any rate.
Indeed, I think one of the biggest challenges we've noticed with SaaS companies which are scaling, when they give us a remit, for example, find us a sales director for the UK or for the US, that can take a month, for example. You go through a process, and by the time you've made the decision to make a hire, the original job spec has changed. It's become more senior because the software company is scaling so fast that the jobs become bigger. So you end up having to start over again. So that's another bumpy road that some of these companies may find. What will that job spec look like in a month's time or 3 months' time when that individual's going to start the job? It will be a different job because we're scaling so fast, nothing stands still.
That is interesting. Let's dig into that a little more. Is there a specific story? Obviously, removing the names to protect the innocent.
Absolutely. We had a situation with a very hot fintech SaaS company a few months ago. They hired a country manager through us, and then within 3 months, that role became even bigger. It was going to look after customer success, a bigger team, different geographies. But then the individual had only looked after the UK before, not France and Germany and Sweden. So the role wasn't quite right for them anymore because they've just grown so fast.
How often does that happen?
In SaaS, it's happening all the time. It's happening all the time. Is just the speed of change.
Okay. How do you react to that? Because you're brought in, and I'm sure the first few times it happened, it was like a big trip up for you, right? And then after that, you learn to expect it. And now you're probably educating your
absolutely
clients.
So I was on the phone to a client earlier in Spain, and we had the conversation, and we're looking for a head of marketing, but there's no management in the beginning. But we're thinking we want someone who's got the skill set of managing others in a past life. So as the role gets bigger, it's going to get bigger and bigger all the time. Demand generation, they already got the management skills, so we're future proofing that candidate. I think that's really important. And on the subject of Spain, another important consideration for scaling is when you pick your location. So you got all these hot spots like Berlin, Barcelona at the moment. You get to a certain size where there's a real lack of senior commercial SaaS talent living in those regions. So you have to import people from other parts of the world. So actually picking the location is absolutely key, of course, as well, if you want to scale and find the right people to work there.
Have you found it's easier to go from, like, take a candidate from the US to the EU than the other way around?
Again, in terms of, I'm talking more about moving people across Europe. So it's very difficult to get people to move out of Germany, for example. The Dutch, the British, they're more mobile. But I guess it's different on a country by country basis.
For those who don't know, the EU is a lot more easily set up to move from one country to another if you're a member.
Absolutely.
Just go over and start working.
Yes,
tomorrow. So I like that a lot. Tell us another success story. I really want to hear about these surprise struggles and how you've helped companies overcome problems that, like we just discussed, they may not have even recognized that they were going to have in short order.
Yes, it's. I think one of the differences we use in this fast-growing SaaS industry, when we provide a short list of maybe 5 or 7 candidates, because the market moves so fast, is to provide a backup for the backup for the backup. So the company will hire the number one, then they might have another role appear, or that person falls to the wayside because they've taken another job. So it's so important to have a backup there. So, and often some of the success stories, the client will end up taking 2 or 3 candidates from us off the one shortlist for different roles. So I think it's giving the SaaS company as many good options as possible. I think that's really important, putting them in a strong position of choice.
How does that work out? Like, do they succeed on the average of the 3 guys or candidates? Like, how does that work out? How often do people stick around that you help get a role?
So that's a great question, and it's another major consideration. If the SaaS organization is offering stock options, then the individual is more likely to stick around and also take a role. So you'd be surprised how many SaaS startups and emerging SaaS companies we described earlier don't offer stock, particularly in Europe. So if they offer stock, they're going to hang around. But from our recent searches on the West Coast, people's resumes themselves are so jumpy. Every 6 months, 12 months, they're changing jobs. There's so much opportunity there. So we just see so many resumes of jumpy sales candidates, particularly in the US.
What does that do? Because for you as a screening recruiter, I'm trying to avoid that word because I think what you're doing is at a higher level than that. What does that do? Because I know early in my career, I moved around a lot. The longest job I've ever had was 4 years as a credit manager for a national electrical wholesaler. But I would go back and forth between sales and marketing jobs and factory management roles. And it got to a point where I had people saying to me, we don't know what you are, right? We can't figure you out. Finally, I just went and made my own classification. But what can candidates do to try and manage that appearance of job hopping, let's say, or opportunity hopping?
I think it depends on location, so and demand and supply. So many geographies, we're looking for stability. Our clients are looking for stability, at least 3 years, 3 years, 2 years. Of course, everybody has the occasional job hop or two. But in a market like California, where there's so few available, strong salespeople available, if you can only find a small number of available people who want to work for you and they're jumped around, they'll get jobs. But when the market's much tighter, there's when you've got more of a choice of great salespeople, you can be more picky. Okay. If you have jumped around a lot, to answer your question, if I was a salesperson, lots of short stints, you need to prove that, okay, I had short stints, but this is how much software I sold in each of those short stints. If you sold nothing, then it's going to be very difficult. But if you can provide proof of earnings and commissions and references to back up that your short stints were very lucrative, you did very well, but you left because the companies were acquired or went bust or whatever, then you're okay. You just got to qualify each short stint to make sure this person's a good success or not a success.
Okay, so there you are, sales candidates. Have the backup to your story. The factual
and
proof nearby. What other issues that tech founders who were scaling fast weren't expecting in terms of talent acquisition and building for the future have you helped them?
So I think it's when they're looking to scale in Europe's largest economy, which is Germany, it's the speed or the lack of speed it takes. It takes so long to go through just to hire a salesperson. There's a massive cultural difference that German people aren't as attracted to startups, emerging SaaS companies, being the first person in, as other nationalities are. It's less attractive, much less attractive. But the notice periods, so I get calls now in August from some German people asking me to keep an eye out for the next job next April. They're thinking 8 months ahead. They're not planning next month. So in the US, it's very quick. It's a 2-week turnaround. People get a job offer, they sign, and they resign, they're out. In Sweden, it's a minimum of 3 months notice just to resign from a sales job. So if you headhunt in Sweden now, you're talking January start date. So it's really planning ahead if you can, making sure you're aware of the local laws, but also in Germany, it's pretty much zero unemployment. So you're not going to find very good salespeople out of work. So you're going to have to go through this painful notice period and time and lack of urgency, because the logistics as well of having to interview people in Germany from the US, it takes time. You might be planning 1 or 2 trips in 3 months. So it takes time. You've got to plan it. It's slow.
Very, very interesting. For the hyperactive Americans, tech founders watching this or listening to this, the world is different out there.
Indeed.
Actually, and they still have the same problem, which is salespeople who are good at what they do tend to not be hanging around on the street corner, right?
Indeed.
How do you overcome that? Because they're not standing there going, "Oh, hi, I'm looking for work," right? What do you do to attract those people? I don't need you to share any special proprietary things, but
So if we were looking to hire a senior sales executive to sell SaaS, it's a numbers game. We have to approach 200, 250 individuals, and you'll find the 1% who are actually open for a new role. They're employed, or their company's just being sold, for example. So out of 250, you might end up with 5 to 10 people who want to talk to you. It's like prospecting. And then out of that 5 or 10 people, you reduce it down to 3 or 4. So it is a quality numbers game. You just have to map out the market and its percentages. You're going to get a small percentage of interested people.
Okay. And in your role with these European countries, planning out so far ahead, you've got to start doing that prospecting work in the next 3 months, let's say, right? To get somebody ready for January.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh,
And now's the time for Germany. If you want to hire a German sales rep, now's the time to start looking.
That is very different, even than what I'm used to. Fascinating. So you can be scaling fast, but in certain locations in the world, the hiring process is still going to be slow.
Yes.
How long, obviously in different areas, there's going to be a different answer to this question. How long is the average engagement with you?
So we've turned searches around in 7 days, but we've had something go on 9 months. Not because we're slow or whatever, it's just because things slow down, get put on hold. It can vary, but I would say we will always do our search work in around 4 weeks. The actual headhunting part, we can produce shortlists in 4 weeks.
Okay. So people should be preparing, even if they're in the United States, they should be getting ready. As you're approaching that 50-person level, that is probably a time to start looking, I would imagine. Even if you're not actively going, hey, let's hire somebody, you should be looking around for executive search help.
Yes, and of course it depends where your customers are. If you just landed your first customer in a new region, then that's a logical time to start putting some people in that region to support that customer or to grow it rather than going in cold. Or often we've got American clients who are selling directly into Europe, and they don't have anyone in Europe until they maybe found a handful of clients. Then they decide to put someone there.
All right. Well, let's finish up. I want you to share another success story with us. Give us some details and paint a picture for everyone listening.
I'm just off the top of my head. So about a year ago, we were asked to find a VP of global sales for a German SaaS company based out of Berlin. They wanted somebody who spoke English fluently as a native, so they didn't want anyone based out of Germany unless they were born and bred from England. So we had to do a complete search across the UK, Ireland. We'd had to do a complete relocation, of course, as well. And that individual's been with the company for a while now, done exceptionally well. So that's becoming more and more common, just bringing in exceptional talent and placing them across the EU.
Awesome. Well, our guest today has been Ben Watkins of Intrinsic Search. Thanks for joining us. Where can people connect with you?
So intrinsicsearch.com, you'll find my details on there. I'm also on LinkedIn, of course. And again, if anyone would like a free copy of the goal book for European expansion and hiring for SaaS firms, you can contact me through our website. But my email address is BEWB for Ben, E for England, W for Watkins @intrinsicsearch.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today and letting us know a little bit about the bumpy roads in scaling SaaS and tech firms with regards to HR.
Thank you very much, Jason.
You bet.